Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
English is a language spoken all around the world. You can hear it in Europe, America, Asia, Africa, and Australia. Many people, about 370 to 400 million, speak English as their first language. This means it is the language they learned as children and use every day. A similar number of people use English as a second language. This means they have another main language, but they also use English often. And hundreds of millions more learn it as a foreign language in schools. It is true that about 1/4 of all people on Earth use English in some way. Because so many people in so many places speak or use English, it is known as a world language. Why do so many people speak English? In countries like Britain and the United States, English is the language most people learn first. But in other places, like India, Kenya, or Singapore, English is a second language. People there have their own first language, but they use English for school, work, government, and news. In many other countries, people learn English at school as a foreign language, but it is not an official language there. English is also important for talking with people from different countries. Scientists, doctors, and business people often use English to communicate worldwide. Many popular songs and movies are in English. Even people who control planes and ships use a special, simple English to be clear and safe. News from around the world is often shared in English, on television, radio, or the Internet. English started to spread a long time ago. British people traveled and made new homes in North America, the Caribbean, Australia, and parts of Asia in the 1600s and 1700s. Later, in the 1800s, Britain was a very strong country with many factories. New machines came from Britain, so people learned English to understand and use them. In the 1900s, more and more international business happened. Air travel and new ways to communicate, like the telephone and computers, helped English spread even faster. Companies wanted to do business with American companies, which were often rich. For this, they needed to speak English. Many international groups and organizations chose English as their main language for work, like the European Central Bank. So English is not just for one country. It is a tool for many people to talk and work together across borders. But how did this language become so widely used and change so much over time? Its history is long and full of interesting stories. In this book, we will look at how English started and how different groups of people and important events changed the way English sounds, looks, and works. This journey will show us how English became the important language it is today. 2. The start of English. The story of English begins a very long time ago, with a big family of languages. This family is called the Indo-European family. Many languages around the world belong to this group, including Latin, Greek, and the early forms of English. We know these languages are related because of people like Sir William Jones. In the late 1700s, this British judge studied Sanskrit, an old language from India. He saw that Sanskrit was very similar to Latin and Greek. For example, the word for father in Latin was pater, and in Sanskrit it was Peter. Both are clearly similar to the English word father. The word for mother also showed these connections. Sir William Jones suggested that all these languages came from an even older shared language. He called this a common source in 1786. Today, we call this ancient language Proto-Indo-European. People think that a group called the Kurgans spoke this language. They lived in an area that is now southern Russia, starting from after 5000 BC. Around 3500 BC, the Kurgans began to move. They traveled far across Europe and Asia. As groups moved apart, their way of speaking slowly changed. Over a very long time, these different ways of speaking became separate languages. Today, over 2 billion people speak an Indo-European language as their first language. The Celts were one of the first groups of Indo-European speakers to move into Britain. They arrived from Central Europe around the 5th century BC. In Ireland and Scotland, they spoke Goidelic, also known as Gaelic. In southern England and Wales, they spoke Brythonic, or British. The Celts were the main people in Britain for many years. In AD 43, the powerful Romans invaded Britain. They stayed for almost 400 years, controlling most of what is now England. The Romans brought a new way of life and their language, Latin. Some rich British Celts learned Latin. However, Latin did not become a new local language in Britain. The Roman Empire became weaker. In AD 410, the Romans finally left Britain. The country was then without their strong army, making it open to new invaders. In AD 449, Germanic people started to arrive. The Jutes came from Denmark, settling in southern Britain. The Angles, also from Denmark, settled in eastern Britain. In 477, the Saxons, from what is now Germany, arrived in southern Britain. These three groups are known as the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons came in large numbers and took land from the British Celts. Many Celts left their homes, moving north, west into Wales, or to France. The Jutes stayed in Kent. The Angles moved north, and the Saxons went southwest. These groups slowly formed 7 kingdoms in what is now England. The invaders called the British Celts Walos, meaning foreigners. This word is where the modern English word Welsh comes from. At first, the Celts called all the new invaders Saxons. But later, the word Angli, which became Angle, was used for all of them. Today, we call them the Anglo-Saxons. From the different dramatic ways of speaking used by these people, the first form of English began to grow. This was the true start of the English language. 3. Old English and the Vikings. Old English was the language spoken in England and parts of Scotland from about 450 to 1150. It was the language of the Anglo-Saxons. There were four main types, or dialects, like West Saxon and Mercian. They had small differences in words and grammar. The Anglo-Saxons took few words from the Celts, perhaps only 20. These were mainly for natural things they hadn't seen before, like crag, high rock, or come, deep valley. Some city names, like London, and river names, like Thames, are Celtic. Also, about 50 Latin words such as strat, street, and well came into Old English before the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. Most Anglo-Saxons could not read or write. Writers used runes, which were old Germanic letters. In 597, Augustine and monks arrived from Rome to teach Christianity. King Ethelbert welcomed them. Later, Christianity spread from the north with the Irish monk Aidan. By the end of the 7th century, all Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were Christian. These monks taught Latin and Greek, which brought about 450 new Latin words into Old English. Some examples are munach, monk, school, school, and fenister, window. Monks started writing in Old English, which was uncommon at the time. This made England an important learning center in Western Europe by the 700s. The words in Old English were mostly Germanic. About 85% of these words are not used today, replaced by Latin or French later. But many common, modern English words like the, and, can, and get come from Old English. Basic words like man, person, chilled, child, hus, house, eat on, eat, and sleep on, sleep, also have Old English roots. Many English place names today come from Old English, such as Oxford, from ford for river crossing, and Birmingham, from ham for village. Some days of the week, like Tuesday and Thursday, are named after Anglo-Saxon gods. Old English made new words by joining two words, like bookcraft for literature. Poets used this to make descriptions, calling the body a bone house. Words also changed by adding parts, like gone, to go, becoming ingone, to go in. Old English grammar was different. Word order was less important than word endings, which showed a word's role. Nouns changed for plural forms, like guma, man, to guman, men. Nouns had 3 genders, and adjectives matched them. There were more pronouns, including specific words for we too and you too. Verbs often changed a vowel for the past tense, like sing to sang. Old English had twice as many of these irregular verbs as we do now. In the 700s, new invaders arrived in Britain, the Vikings, also called Danes. From 787, groups from Denmark and Norway came in ships, stealing from towns and churches, especially along the north coast. They destroyed important learning centers like Lindisfarne in 793. By 850, a large Viking army captured London and Canterbury, leading to a long war. The war ended in 878, When King Alfred, the Anglo-Saxon king of Wessex, 871–899, won a major battle. He made a peace agreement with the Vikings. England was split into two parts. The northern and eastern area, known as the Danelaw, was for the Vikings, and King Alfred ruled the rest. King Alfred wanted to restore learning. He decided that English, not Latin, should be the language for schools and books. At 40, he learned Latin and started translating important books into Old English. His goal was for all young, free English people to be able to read English writing well. He had Bede's The History of the English Church and People translated, which provides key details about early English history. In these texts, the word English began to describe both the people and their language. Alfred also started the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a history of England written in English by monks. This was the first history of its kind in Europe not written in Latin. After Alfred's death, much Old English literature survived, including works by Ælfric and the epic poem Beowulf, which tells the story of a hero fighting monsters. The Vikings and English people in the Danelaw could understand each other because their languages, Old Norse and Old English, were both Germanic. This close contact made Old English grammar simpler. Many old word endings disappeared. For example, making nouns plural often began to use s. Also, many verbs that once changed their vowel for the past tense started to use the d ending instead. Thousands of new words came from Old Norse into Old English. About 400 to 500 of these words are still used today. They were common words for everyday things. These included window for the house, leg and neck for body parts, and verbs like get, take, and want. Many words beginning with sk, such as skin, skirt, and sky, are from Old Norse. Other examples are bag, die, egg, husband, and same. Sometimes Old Norse words replaced Old English ones, like "syrster," Old Norse, for sister. Other times, both words remained, but gained slightly different meanings, such as wish, Old English, and want, Old Norse. Old Norse also brought new grammar forms. The word are replaced the older sinden. Also, the pronouns they, their, and them slowly replaced older English pronouns. The Vikings also gave names to many places. Over 1,500 places in northern England have Scandinavian names. Many end in by, meaning farm or town, such as Whitby. Family names ending in son, like Johnson, also come from the Vikings. After more fighting, Danish kings ruled England for some time. Then, in 1066, the English king Edward died. Harold became king, but William, a powerful duke from Normandy, claimed the throne. He said Edward had promised it to him. This led to William's decision to invade England. This invasion would bring even more massive changes to the English language. 4. The French change English. In the year 1066, a great change came to England. William, the leader of Normandy in northern France, led an army. They fought King Harold's army at the Battle of Hastings. King Harold was killed, and the Normans won. William became the new king of England. He was called William the Conqueror. This event changed the English language a lot. After the Normans won, French became the language of power. The king, his rich friends, and all important people spoke French. People in the government, in churches, in law courts, and those who wrote books used French. For many years, about 300, French was the main language for important matters in England. Only ordinary people kept speaking English. They spoke it in their homes and villages, in different ways across the country. But slowly, English started to become important again. Many Norman men married English women. Their children learned English from their mothers. So more and more people from important families started to speak English. Another big change happened in the year 1204. The King of England, King John, lost his lands in Normandy to the King of France. This made the rich families in England feel more connected to England, not to France. They began to see England as their true home. People also started to feel that the French spoken in England was not as good as the French spoken in Paris. This made them feel prouder of their English language. Ordinary people did not learn French. A poet in the late 1200s wrote that almost no common people knew French. English was the language of the country, and people were proud of it and their history. Around the year 1300, a poet translated a book into English so that common people could understand it. Then a long war started between England and France. It was called the 100 Years' War, from 1337 to 1453. During this war, people in England felt more strongly about their country. They saw the English language as a special part of being English. Another event called the Black Death hit England between 1348 and 1375. This terrible illness killed many people, including many churchmen and teachers. Less educated people who only spoke English took their places. Also, because fewer working people were alive, they could ask for better pay and conditions. As ordinary people became more important, their language, English, also became more important. More people used English in government because fewer people understood French. In 1362, English was used for the first time in Parliament, the country's main ruling body. In 1399, Henry IV became king. He was the first English-speaking king since the Normans came. In the next century, English replaced French in homes, schools, and government. It also became the language for writing letters. By 1450, most letters were written in English, not Latin. English had survived, but it was very different. The language from this time is called Middle English. Over 400 years after the Norman conquest, English changed more than ever before. Its grammar became simpler. For example, many different word endings for nouns, Adjectives and pronouns disappeared. Words began to be placed in a specific order in sentences to show meaning, like subject, verb, object. Thousands of new French words came into English between 1100 and 1500. Many of these words are still used today. These French words touched every part of life. For the home, words like blanket, chair, and dinner became part of English. In science and arts, words like dance, music, and poet appeared. For law and government, words such as crime, judge, and prison were added. Even nature got new names, like flower, forest, and ocean. Sometimes French words took the place of Old English words. For example, the French word people replaced an Old English word. But sometimes both the French and Old English words stayed, but with slightly different meanings. For instance, ask, Old English, and demand, French, both stayed. We can still see how people of different classes used different words. Words for animals in the field, like cow or pig, were English, but words for the meat on the table, like beef or pork, were French. The most famous writer in Middle English was Geoffrey Chaucer. He lived in London from 1343 to 1400. Chaucer was a poet and an important government worker. He wrote in the East Midlands dialect, which was spoken around Oxford, London, and Cambridge. He used many French words in his writing. His most famous work is called the Canterbury Tales, written in the 1390s. It tells the stories of many ordinary people traveling together to a church in Canterbury. Chaucer described these people in a very lively way. He even made a joke about the French accent some English people had. Chaucer was very good at showing how people really spoke. He greatly influenced other writers who came after him. His work showed that English was a rich and important language, ready for a new future. A New English and Shakespeare. The end of the 15th century marked an important time for the English language. It was a new beginning. The 16th century brought many changes across Europe. People explored new lands like the Americas, Asia, and Africa. They discovered new things and had many new ideas. This time was a great period for learning and new knowledge. Because of all these new ideas, the English language had to grow and change. It needed more words to talk about everything new. One very big change came with printing. In the year 1476, William Caxton brought the printing machine to London. This machine changed how books were made. Before this, people wrote books by hand. It was very slow and costly. With the printing machine, it became possible to make thousands of copies of books much faster and cheaper. This meant that more people could buy and read books. But there was a problem. English had many different ways of spelling and saying words because of its many dialects. Caxton himself wrote that the English spoken in one area was different from another. He and other printers chose to use the East Midlands dialect for their books. This was the language spoken in London, Oxford and Cambridge, and by many government officials. Slowly, this helped to make English spelling more standard. However, some words kept old spellings even when their sound changed. For example, the K in knee and the W in wrong were once spoken but are now silent. As learning grew, thousands of new words came into English. Between the years 1100 and 1500, many French words had joined English. Now, in the 16th and 17th centuries, about 30,000 new words came from about 50 other languages. Most of these new words came from Latin and Greek. They were needed to describe new things in science, medicine, and other fields of study. For example, words like desperate, expensive, explain, and fact came from Latin. Other words came from French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. As people traveled more, words from America, Africa, and Asia also entered English. For example, chocolate and tomato came from Mexico, banana from Africa, and coffee from Turkey. Not everyone liked all these new foreign words. Some people thought they were strange and unnecessary. They believed English could express everything well enough without borrowing from other languages. But the new words continued to come, and many of them stayed and became a normal part of English. Writers also made new words in other ways, like using verbs as nouns or putting two words together, for example, chairman. This time was also the age of great literature. One of the most famous writers was William Shakespeare, who lived from 1564 to 1616. He is known as the greatest writer of plays in the English language. Shakespeare understood people very well, and he showed this in his plays and poems. He used very rich and creative language. Shakespeare had a huge vocabulary. He created about 2,000 new words that are still part of English today. He also made many expressions that we still use. For example, he wrote phrases like, "It's early days," meaning it's too soon to know what will happen. Tongue-tied, meaning unable to speak because of shyness. The long and the short of it, meaning all that needs to be said. And love is blind. His plays were very popular during his lifetime, and because of this, they had a very big effect on the English language. Another very important book for the English language was the King James Bible. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died. Her cousin, King James VI of Scotland, became King James I of England. In 1604, the new King James ordered a new translation of the Bible into English. There were many English Bibles already, but he wanted one main translation for everyone to use. 54 translators worked together on this project. They used older English translations as a guide. The King James Bible was finished in 1611. This Bible was read in churches all over England, Scotland, and Wales for the next 300 years. Many families also read it at home, and children learned from it in schools. For many people, it was the only book they read again and again. Because so many people read and heard the King James Bible, it had a very big effect on the English language. Many common expressions that we use today came from this Bible. For example, the apple of somebody's eye, meaning a person someone loves very much. By the skin of your teeth, meaning you only just managed to do something. The salt of the earth, meaning a very honest person. And the straight and narrow, meaning an honest way of living. The beautiful language and poetry of the King James Bible also influenced many English writers in the centuries that followed. Rules for English. English changed a lot over time. New words came, and grammar became simpler. In the 1600s and 1700s, people started to worry about these changes. They felt the language was becoming unclear. They wanted rules. They wanted English to be stable and regular so everyone knew the correct way to use it. They thought the language needed to be fixed. This led to the idea of correct English. People wanted to know the right way to speak and write. Jonathan Swift, a writer, said in 1712 that English needed to be controlled. He did not like new or shortened words. He wanted a group to make rules for grammar and spelling. He wanted to fix the language and stop it from changing too much. This idea was popular in other countries, but not fully in England. People soon saw that language always changes. However, this discussion made people think about needing common spellings and grammar. Before the 1600s, English dictionaries were rare. The first English dictionary appeared in 1604. A school teacher named Robert Cowdrey created it. It was called a table alphabetical. This book listed about 2,500 hard English words. It explained their meanings and sometimes their origin, like French or Greek. This dictionary quickly became popular. Later dictionaries explained more common words, not just the difficult ones. They slowly brought more order to spelling. In 1746, some booksellers asked Samuel Johnson, a writer, to make a new English dictionary. Johnson worked on this big project for 9 years. He had 6 people helping him. He read many books and collected examples of words. Then he wrote the meanings for over 42,000 words. He included both difficult and everyday words. Johnson's A Dictionary of the English Language came out in 1755. It was a great success. It gave each word's meaning, pronunciation, and history. It also showed how words were used. For example, he listed 66 meanings for the word take. He used about 114,000 examples from literature. This dictionary was very important in Britain for over 100 years. It helped set standards for English words. Dictionaries helped with spelling, but grammar also needed rules. In the second half of the 1700s, many grammar books appeared. These books aimed to teach correct English. They showed how to speak and write like important literary works. They were often for rich people who wanted to show they were educated. These books said that English grammar should be like Latin grammar. For example, they taught that a sentence should not end with a preposition. Robert Loth's Short Introduction to English Grammar, 1762, and Lindley Murray's English Grammar, 1795, were two very popular books. They greatly influenced how people thought about grammar. Even today, some people still believe there is only one correct way. This sometimes makes native English speakers feel their own language is wrong. However, many people now understand that language changes, and different ways of speaking can be correct if they are clear. Newer grammar books often describe how English is used rather than telling people what to do. Like spelling and grammar, people also wanted one correct pronunciation. Before, regional accents were fine. But in the 1700s, many wanted to speak correctly. Thomas Sheridan, an Irishman, taught correct English sounds. He said good pronunciation showed you were educated. Later, John Walker's dictionary, 1791, used London's educated pronunciation as the standard. It saw other regional accents as wrong. This made some people feel their accent was a disadvantage. Today, regional accents are more accepted. 7. English goes to America. In the early 1600s, English people began to travel far across the Atlantic Ocean. They wanted to start new lives in a new land. In 1607, the first successful English settlement began. It was called Jamestown in Virginia. Later, in 1620, another group of English settlers arrived in what is now Massachusetts. They came on a ship called the Mayflower. By 1640, about 25,000 English people lived in New England. Over the next 2 centuries, many more people came to America, not only from England, but also from other European countries like France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Sadly, Africans were also brought to America by force to work as slaves. They added their own languages and cultures to the growing American society. As English speakers settled in America, their language began to change. They saw new animals, birds, and plants that they had never seen before in England. These new things needed names. Sometimes they used Old English words. For example, they called a bird that looked like an English blackbird simply blackbird. Other times, they made new words by putting 2 English words together. An example is backwoods, which described a forest with few people, or bluegrass for a type of grass. The land was also home to Native Americans who had their own languages. So, the settlers often used Native American words for new place names, such as Massachusetts, Mississippi, and Potomac. Other European languages also influenced American English. The Spanish and French had controlled some parts of America, so some place names came from their languages. For instance, Detroit and St. Louis came from French, and Los Angeles and San Francisco came from Spanish. The Dutch also had a settlement called New Amsterdam, which later became New York. Because of them, some names like Brooklyn and Harlem are still used today. English settlers also borrowed some everyday words from these different languages. They took cookie from Dutch and plaza from Spanish. American English began to sound different too. Some words from the 1600s that were no longer used in Britain continued in America. For example, Americans said fall for autumn and mad for angry. They also kept the word gotten as the past participle of get, which the British stopped using. The way people spoke some sounds also stayed the same as in early English. Many Americans today still say the short A sound in words like grass, similar to how it was said in England before the 1800s. Most Americans also pronounce the R sound at the end of words, like in car, or before a consonant, like in hard, just as the first settlers did. As people moved west across America in the 1800s, they created many new and colorful expressions. Many of these are now used in English around the world. For example, to face the music means to accept bad results. To kick the bucket means to die. And hot under the collar means angry. Words from the railroads also became common, such as to go off the rails, meaning to behave strangely. Later, African Americans also shaped American English, especially with words for music like jazz, and other words like cool for excellent and dude for a man. After America became an independent country in 1776, people wanted to make their own language special. Noah Webster, a teacher, was very important in this. He believed that American English should be just as good as British English, and that Americans did not need to copy the British. Between 1783 and 1785, he wrote books for American schools, including a very popular speller. With the money from his books, Webster created dictionaries. His most famous one, An American Dictionary of the English Language, came out in 1828. It was even bigger than Samuel Johnson's dictionary from Britain. Webster suggested many new spellings that are still used in American English today. For example, he changed color to color, center to center, and traveled to traveled. Not all his ideas were accepted, like changing soup to soup. He also wanted people to pronounce every part of a word clearly, like secretary instead of secretary. Webster's work made American English different and important in its own right. 8. English today and tomorrow. English never stops changing. In the last 200 years, many new words have come into the language. This is because of new ideas in science and new machines. For example, we use words like bronchitis for a sickness and antibiotics for medicine. We talk about genes and DNA from our parents. We also discuss pesticides for farming and nuclear energy for power. These words have become part of our everyday English. New words often come from putting two old words together, like fingerprint or airport. The world of computers has given us many new words like online, user-friendly, and download. Sometimes old words get new meanings. For example, pilot first meant someone who guided ships, but now also means someone who flies a plane. Cassette used to mean a small box. Now it means a device for tapes. Some words come from other languages, like pizza from Italian. Others come from company names, like to Google from the popular internet search engine. Words can also be shortened, like photo for photograph or TV for television. Some words mix parts of two words, like motel from motor and hotel. The Oxford English Dictionary helps us understand this growth. It shows the history of words and how their meanings change over time. English is spoken in many parts of the world. Because of this, there are many different kinds of English. Each country where English is a main language has its own standard English for schools, radio, and television. People use the same grammar and spelling, but their accents can be different. For example, British English and American English have different words and pronunciations. They say ground floor in Britain and first floor in America. They also use motorway in Britain and freeway in America. In other countries like India, Singapore, and Nigeria, English is an official language, but not everyone's first language. Here, local languages often mix with English, creating new Englishes. Sometimes these new kinds of English mix two languages, like Spanglish, Spanish and English, or Hinglish, Hindi and English. This shows how English keeps changing in different places. Modern technology has changed English a lot. The Internet has brought new words like cyberspace, email, website, and blog. It has also given new meanings to old words like link and chat. People use the Internet for writing on websites, sending emails, and chatting. This has led to a new informal way of writing. People often shorten words, use numbers for sounds, and use fewer capital letters or punctuation. For example, "Are you all right?" means "Are you all right?" They also use smileys or short letter groups like LOL for laughing out loud or BTW for by the way. Text messages on phones use similar short language. After learning strict rules for writing at school, many people now enjoy playing with language, sometimes breaking old rules and making new ones. What will happen to English in the future? In countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and Britain, English will still be the main language, but it will keep changing. New slang and dialects will appear, sometimes from groups of people who speak other languages. In places where English is a second language, completely new languages might grow, mixing English with local words, like Sheng in Kenya. Some people think English will stay a world language, with more than half the world speaking it by the year 2050. They believe that countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and Britain will remain important, and that American popular music, films, science, and business will keep English important for communication. English will change, but it will not lose its global power. But others are not so sure. They think languages like Chinese, Spanish, or Arabic might also become world languages as their countries grow stronger. The Internet now has more users who do not speak English as their first language than those who do. So businesses often need to offer information in many languages. Some governments might try to limit English to protect their own languages and customs. In India, for example, there is much discussion about whether teaching children in English in schools helps or harms their learning and their own languages. If English does remain a world language, how will it change? Will it break up into many new languages, like Latin broke into French and Spanish? Or will the different kinds of English become more similar over time? It seems likely that a world standard English might develop for international use, with simpler grammar and pronunciation. At the same time, many regional kinds of English will keep growing and changing. They might become very different, but still connected by television, radio, and the Internet. What do you think will happen to English in the next 100 years?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.